Hi, Dr. Shook here. So today I am in the sauna, as you can see, and in the past I've done a lot of sauna sessions, and I haven't been able to do those as much lately. And I actually wanted to make this video a live stream video, but I wasn't able to do that because of where I'm located in here. My wireless signal is not that great. So anyway, here's what I want to do today. While I'm in here for the next few minutes, I'd like to discuss, and I just want to ask you guys a question. Does everyone know what leaky gut is? Okay, this concept of leaky gut, you hear a lot about it. It's something that's being talked about a lot in the media now, and you see ads all the time on Facebook for people promoting events where they're going to teach you about leaky gut. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to give you guys my perspective and my take on leaky gut, because leaky gut it's important to understand. It's in the scientific literature, you'll find it called intestinal permeability or pathogenic intestinal permeability. So let's talk a little bit about what leaky gut is, how the gut usually works, and then how this process can break down and why it can become a problem and contribute to things like Hashimoto's, autoimmune diseases, and cause problems with thyroid function. Okay, so first of all, when we're talking about leaky gut, we first need to understand how does your what is this? How does the digestive tract work? Okay, so when we talk about leaky gut, we're talking about intestinal permeability, or a leakiness of the intestinal wall that lets proteins and different bacteria and things into the bloodstream that should not be there. Okay. So normally what happens is, and we're talking about, primarily here, we're talking about the small intestine. Okay, so small intestine is between the stomach and the large intestine. So normally the small intestine is where most of your vitamins, minerals, and nutrients are absorbed. So whenever, normal situation, your gut wall has these cells that face inward. So you're looking down a tube, right, which is the small intestinal tube. It's your GI tract. Now the wall of the tube is made of these enterocytes, of these cells that face inward. Okay, so they have finger-like projections, kind of like my finger does here. There's a cell, and then there are these finger-like projections that they call microvilli. Okay, the microvilli are where you'll absorb different types of vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. And every microvilli, they'll absorb different things. Okay, so this is kind of like shag carpet. These things face inward on the GI tract, or they face inward in your small intestine. So what happens is those microvilli absorb the nutrients that your body breaks down and absorbs from your food. The microvilli actually have a very thin covering over the top of them. Okay, all the microvilli, they're just not directly exposed. They have this thin covering. That thin covering is kind of like a good analogy that I've heard used is kind of like cheesecloth. Okay, so if this is like shag carpet, then you have this cheesecloth over the top of it. And you know, cheesecloth is designed to strain things, right? It keeps larger particles out and lets thicker particles through, or drains water off. It does several different things. So you got these microvilli, which are kind of like shag carpet. You've got this cheesecloth, which also lets things through, but you know, it's really, really small particles, right? So in your GI tract, what happens is when you consume foods, those foods, they go down your esophagus into your stomach. The stomach acid works on breaking those foods down. Once the foods enter the very beginning of the small intestine, we call it the jejunum, this area, the acidity from the stomach will signal and trigger the gallbladder and the pancreas to release enzymes and squirt enzymes into that, what they call a bolus of the breaking down food. And the acidity from your stomach actually triggers it. So if you have low acidity, that can be a problem, and you can have insufficiency of release of those enzymes. So it's just as we go, I'll kind of point out some things that can be problematic. Acidity is important. Okay, you have to have enough acidity. So the acidity, the stomach, the bolus of food moves into the jejunum, which is the very beginning of the small intestine, and that's where all the breaking down begins. Okay, well that's where additional breaking down begins. It really started with chewing, right? You break down your food by chewing. You should be chewing 10 to 30 times per bite. Then when you swallow, it gets into the stomach. The stomach acidity mixes with the food you've already chewed. The stomach does this churning motion in combination with the acid, starts breaking things down. Then as the stomach acid increases at the very bottom of the stomach, when it gets to a high enough point, the sphincter, the muscle, will open at the bottom of the stomach, let the bolus of food, or the food that was in your stomach, into the jejunum, or the small intestine. That acidity triggers the gallbladder, the pancreas to release enzymes. They mix with the acidic food that you've already chewed, that your stomach has churned, and then you start breaking down that food more thoroughly. Now, this is the point where your body starts to, where you need to start, you'll start absorbing the nutrients from your food. Now, your body, what happens is as this food moves down and through the length of the small intestine, these enzymes and the things that are released from the gallbladder and the pancreas and the acidity, they start to break down that food from the large particles, the macromolecules, like the carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. They start to break those down, and as they become smaller and smaller molecules, as they travel further down the GI tract, further down the small intestine, they become smaller and smaller and smaller until they're small enough that they pass through the cheesecloth. Remember, so you get the microvilli, you get the cheesecloth on top. The cheesecloth has really, really tiny holes, and as it passes through the cheesecloth, it can go into the microvilli where it's absorbed into the cell, and then it goes into the bloodstream, and your body uses those particles, those vitamins and minerals, and the proteins in your food are broken down into amino acids. Okay, so it uses those amino acids to rebuild your bone, your brain, all the cellular functions, and that's how it works. Okay, the foods that you eat, so like for gluten, for example. So gluten has it's been in the media a lot lately about being very inflammatory. Now, gluten is a protein molecule that we're talking about. Okay, we're talking about a protein. Now, all you need to know about proteins is this: proteins are basically like a chain. Okay, if I was holding a chain in front of me, a protein is a chain with several links, and each one of those links of the chain, they are amino acids, and they're joined together. Okay, they're joined together. Your enzymes and everything we've talked about, your digestive processes, they're designed to break the amino acids apart. So break the proteins apart so that the amino acids are they're singular. They just have one amino acid. So basically your enzymes come in and you've got this long chain of proteins, and they snip and cut each one of the links so that you have free-floating amino acids. That's what your body uses. What you don't want is partially digested proteins, where you have a good portion of the protein, like maybe you have 3 or 4 amino acids still linked together, and those leak through the cheesecloth, through the microvilli, and they get into the bloodstream. Now that's a bad scenario. Now let's talk about how that can happen. So with leaky gut, what happens is the cheesecloth starts to get tears in it, and as the cheesecloth gets tears in it through inflammation, through foods that you might be a celiac, or you might be non-celiac, gluten sensitive. And even, there was research put out this year, 2016. There was research put out by Harvard this year, and they looked at people that had celiac disease. They looked at people that had celiac. They were gluten sensitive, but they were non-celiac. They looked at people that did not have celiac disease, no known gluten sensitivity. And what they found out was that whenever these people consumed gluten, all of them developed intestinal permeability, every single one of them. Okay, so what that research told us was that if you eat gluten, period, it doesn't matter if you're sensitive or not. If you have tests that are sensitive or not, you're going to develop intestinal permeability, or you're going to have intestinal permeability. Now, what I suggest is that not everyone eliminate gluten, but that you get tested, right? So we use Array 3 through Cyrex Labs, which they check 8 different portions of the gluten protein to determine if you're gluten sensitive, or if you have some of the markers for celiac. That's the test we use, because they're the only lab that does that. So you get tested, you find out if it's a problem for you. Okay, number one. Okay, so I don't digress too far. You've got the microvilli, you've got the cheesecloth. If the cheesecloth, if there's inflammation that's recurring, if you have a sensitivity to gluten or an allergy to a food, it will tear the cheesecloth. As a cheesecloth is torn, larger molecules can go through the cheesecloth into the microvilli and get into your bloodstream. That's not good. We do not want these larger molecules in the bloodstream, because your body doesn't know what. So if you have a partially digested gluten protein, so remember, gluten protein's this long. Let's say it's made of 10 amino acids. Your enzymes only break it in one place, and you've got a chain of 4 and a chain of 6, and those leak through the cheesecloth, through the microbiota into the bloodstream. Well, your immune system is going to see that, and it's not going to know what it is. And that's what your immune system, when it sees it, it says, wait, this isn't what we rebuild our bones, our brain, our tissues with. This is something foreign. I don't know what this is. And your immune system will launch attack against that foreign protein. So what happens is that can, through processes we know called molecular mimicry, where that protein sequence may look like some of your own tissues, and this process called cross-reactivity, that you can end up having an attack against some of your own tissues because this large undigested food protein leaks through the gut wall, through the leaky gut, into the bloodstream, and triggers an immune response. So here's the thing. If leaky gut's something that is very, very important and very relevant if you're dealing with Hashimoto's or Graves' disease or thyroid dysfunction, because it creates a number of different problems. But I will tell you that I'm very hesitant. Changing diet is one thing that can help people, but I'm very hesitant. And what I found through the years of practice is that you can't treat everyone the same. I mean, that's one thing. Everyone has their own unique drivers of, let's say if it's leaky gut, they have their own unique drivers of leaky gut. So someone might have an infection, a yeast infection, a parasitic infection, a bacterial infection of the gut that's causing chronic inflammation, that's tearing up the cheesecloth or breaking the gut down. Okay, and then that causes you to start reacting to all your foods. Other people may have had an infection, or they may have chronic inflammation that has actually caused problems with the speed of their digestive tract, their gut transit time. So how fast the food moves from the stomach through the small intestine, through the large intestine, and is then eliminated. If you have decreased vagal tone, so if your vagus nerve, which is a nerve that goes from your brainstem to your digestive tract, if that nerve is not adequately stimulating your stomach, your pancreatic enzymes, your digestive tract, you're going to have slower transit time of the food, and it will sit in the intestinal tract longer, and that's where you start to develop changes in your bacteria, yeast infections, and these other things. So just because you have an infection of your gut doesn't mean that the infection is a problem. It could mean that you have a brain problem where you're not stimulating the digestive tract properly, causing this stagnation or slowing of your digestion that then promotes overgrowth of bacteria, yeast, and all these other problems. And if you just look at the digestive tract and you're not considering these brain-based issues, then what you end up having is recurrent problems. You find the first test, it comes back and say, oh, I've got a yeast infection. We take an antifungal, go on an anti-yeast diet, and you feel so much better. And then you try to go back, and guess what? It comes back. A few months, it comes back. And you repeat this cycle because it might not be the gut. It might be the brain. Okay, so we're starting to get into functional neurology here, where it's looking at how your brain stimulates the gut or fails to, and the processes that affect that. So it's not always that simple. And those are just a few examples of some of the things that can contribute to that. It's just like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, where people bloat after they eat. They have this overgrowth of bacteria in their small intestine that actually should be only found in the large intestine. And they have this overgrowth in the small intestine, and then when they eat, they bloat because of certain foods or carbohydrates they eat, or certain fibers in foods. And they bloat 45 minutes to an hour after they eat. That is an overgrowth of bacteria. And a lot of people think, well, it's great, they've got a new antibiotic for this, or I can go on a FODMAP-free diet, or I can take these natural antibacterials that will kill it. And guess what happens? They do that, and guess what? It comes back because they're not focusing. They have had no one to consider, and their doctors don't understand the concept of the gut motility, the vagus nerve tone, and vagal nerve. So a lot of this stuff that I'm teaching you guys, I've been very fortunate to learn from some brilliant doctors that are functional neurologists, and that are also, I think, the best in the world at functional medicine. And so, I've had an opportunity to really learn from some people that are changing the world. And that's why I'm compelled. You guys need to know this stuff, because you're not going to, every time someone comes to my office, or I talk to someone, I just know that this may be the only opportunity you have to get this information, because so few people are really being exposed to it and understand it. And from our traditional medical model is just it's not designed to address these things. It's not designed to give your doctors enough time to discuss them with you if they knew them. And most of your primary care physicians are not familiar with this stuff. And that's why a lot of times they'll meet it with great hesitancy and reluctance and say, well, you need to get off the internet. You go and you say, well, what about leaky gut? And a lot of them don't even know that or don't believe that that's something that really exists. You know, everyone's different. All your doctors are different, and they're different, have different degrees of education and openness. And so anyway, leaky gut is something that's a really, really big problem. I want to explain a little bit of it to you guys. What you have to do is, so once you start developing leaky gut or intestinal permeability, what we do is, so there's an algorithm or an approach that I'll typically use. So first of all, we want to know if it's there. So in a lot of patients, we can do testing. So I will check the barrier systems. Okay, so barrier system number one, I'd get a test done to check the GI tract barrier to see if you have breakdown in the tight junctions where the cells come together, or those remember the microvilli with the enterocytes, the cells, they join together, so they can break down between them, so food can pass between them. They can break down through them. They can actually destroy the cell, and it can be transcellular or through the cell. So we can do testing to determine if the leaky gut's there. A blood test. We can also check to see if the blood-brain barrier is intact. This is huge. Like, I don't even have time to go over this. I've gone way too long now. But it's huge for the blood-brain barrier. If it's not intact, then you can have all kinds of inflammation. You set off an inflammatory cascade in the brain, and you can create all of these problems, especially associated with Hashimoto's that are brain-based inflammatory problems that we want to stop, because the brain is absolutely at risk with Hashimoto's. So we can check to see if the barriers are compromised, and if they're compromised, then we can check to see what's driving the breakdown of the barriers. So we can look for food sensitivities, we can look for inflammatory, like pathogenic yeast, bacteria, or parasites, and we can also look for environmental chemicals, which is a much bigger deal today. So the reason that I'm in the sauna is because I'm sweating, right? So that's one of my forms of detoxification. So eliminating through your bowels, through sweat, and through urine is a great way that you can biotransform or break down some of these environmental chemicals. The thing with that is that you do not want to do this type of detoxification until you focused on balancing blood sugar, healing the gut, and decreasing inflammation. Okay, so those are critical things that we work on first. But we can definitely do testing to determine if the gut's compromised, okay, if the blood-brain barrier is compromised. If it is, then we can research and determine and investigate the drivers of the barrier breakdown. Once we have that information, we can formulate an accurate plan to help you figure out how to work on restoring and healing the leaky gut so that you can start to develop tolerance to foods again, and you can really work on getting your life back. But I just wanted to spend some time, since I'm in the sauna, talking about leaky gut, what it is, some of the topics and things that are important that surround it, and just really let you guys know that I appreciate you coming to our site to learn more about your health. If you have any questions or if there's anything we can do for you, we're here. Definitely just share, just comment. I'll try to do as much as I can. Again, I wanted this to be live streamed so you guys could participate, but where I'm at in my house, I just can't do that right now. So I appreciate you guys. If you need anything, let us know, and I hope this has been helpful. Hope you have a great day. Hey guys, Dr. Shook, thank you for viewing our videos. I hope they help you out. If you want to, just subscribe to our channel somewhere here. You can watch a video that YouTube's actually selected for you, so hopefully it'll help you out. If you need any other information or resources, just look in the description. We've got links to our website, to our 9 lab test guidebook, and everything else that we do. I really appreciate you, and I hope you guys have a great